ever since we started having Inspire events, and we decided we were going to keep using January to talk about racism as long as we needed to, so not seeing any real quick end to that, unfortunately. I've used my time in the past to talk about white privilege, to talk about implicit bias. Today I want to get even more specific and address my role and responsibility as a white woman. Martin Luther King wrote in his letter to Birmingham, "I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I've almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's greatest stumbling block in the stride toward freedom is the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is an absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice." So today I'm going to allow other voices to convict and rattle me out of what is too easily my own complacency. I want to share today, not my own words, but words from a blog called Real Talk, Women of Color and Allies. Fellow white women, we need to talk about our devotion to the inoffensive, our culturally ingrained pull towards all things moderate, our desire to be Switzerland, the United Nations of the benefit of the doubt, and the gatekeepers of respectability. So accustomed are we to negotiating and moderating our way through life's more unpleasant moments, we've taken these familiar rusty tools and barreled headlong into anti-racist work, firmly believing that the uniform spreading of benevolence across the land will cure all that ails us. It turns out not so much. Our extreme discomfort with discord and our inability to sustain even the mildest of stress fractures when our tools fail us is why we are not moving the needle on meaningful dismantling of systems and institutions that intentionally uphold white supremacy. We recoil from the concepts of subversion and disruption like vampires from the hot sun, because subversion is not polite and disruption is not nice. We need to embrace the discomfort, the edges, and the messiness of overturning that which kept us in the number 2 slot of the power and privilege pyramid for over 500 years. We need to embrace the righteous anger of those who have oppressed and abused, who we have oppressed and abused, and walk willingly into that fire. White supremacy is a free, readily available, and potentially addictive drug, and we've been overdosed and high for centuries. Only as we detox and sober up can we cast aside the twin enablers of richness, of niceness, and negotiation that we've relied upon to manipulate a system that feeds our habit while it destroys people of color. We will be in white supremacy rehab for the rest of our lives. Let's start there. There's no graduation ceremony, and there's no treatment except constant self-examination. As we work on that as diligently and as authentically as we can, we must also acquire and learn to use new tools. Are we willing to spend our social capital on behalf of people of color? Are we prepared to challenge each other and white men to disrupt the status quo at work, at our children's schools, and our valued circles of family and friends, and institutions of higher learning? Are we willing to leverage our white privilege as a protective shield for people of color against law enforcement, ICE, and TSA? Taking direct action in any one of these scenarios will require the antithesis of white women nice. Strategic subversion and an utter disgust for our own collective lack of humanity, humility of thought and deed, an egoless decision-making process that puts people of color first, not as props in our "I'm a good white person" vignette, educating ourselves without defensiveness or fragility on the brutal realities of systemic racism in America. These are just some of the new tools we need to learn to wield effectively if we are to achieve anything resembling justice and equality in our lifetimes. Black blogger and activist Sassy Latte says this about power: as people in marginalized communities gain access to power, the effect is that people who have power are going to have to give some of it up. White women, did you feel those nice nerves tingling and twitching as you hear that sentence? Does your brain default to, but we can do this in a calm and orderly fashion. There's no need to be radical. If it did, you're not alone. We're wired to reach for compromise. We crave the illusion of order. And we truly believe in civility, laws, systems, and rules. Why? Because all of them were created to protect us. Our niceness is simply tacit complicity in the injustices and inequalities that keep people of color systematically and generationally oppressed. So what are concrete steps we can take as we throw off the self-locking restraints of self-serving niceness? A partial but by no means comprehensive list includes a concerned citizens cop watch. Traffic stops can be lethal for Black and brown folks. We need no further proof or discussion on this. The next time you witness one pull over, stay behind the police vehicle and maintain a reasonable distance. Record the entire interaction on your phone without interfering. You cannot be arrested or ticketed under these circumstances. If you're approached by the cop, you probably will be. Inform them that you're a concerned citizen and that you will leave once the person of color has driven safely away. Human resources disruption. Take a good hard look at your place of employment. Is it the typically structured majority white space with a few tokenized faces of color? Change it. Show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are. Calling out microaggressions in our own homes and social gatherings is not only essential, it gives us the opportunity to strengthen our resiliency muscles and forego niceness in the service of justice. Teach your children well. What do you know about anti-racist education at your nearby schools? Is the curriculum an accurate and truthful reflection of the history and reality of racism? Take a deep, conscious dive into the whitewashed narratives embedded in our education and push back hard. Black spaces, white faces. Support people of color-owned businesses, online and in your local community. And as you do so, be aware of your whiteness. Subversion and disruption isn't always bold. Sometimes it takes the form of quiet respect and a willingness to shrink. Be humble, be reverent, be quiet. Vote like you mean it. Campaign for people of color. Financially support candidates of color. Vote for people of color. Money talks. Adjust your budget to include regular and meaningful contributions to groups who directly support people of color, from crisis intervention to long-term planning. And dry those tears. We have to stop reacting as though someone has kidnapped our firstborn anytime we are challenged or held accountable for our words and actions. Weaponized white women tears are toxic. Black and brown men and women have been beaten and murdered to appease our insatiable need to be coddled and protected by our whiteness. Stop crying. Being called a racist is not worse than actually being one. Being called a racist is not worse than actually being the victim of one. Bite your tongue, take a breath, and move through it, clear-eyed, clear-headed, and dry-eyed. And finally, believe what people of color. Perhaps most urgently, we need to believe when a person of color tells you that they've been a victim of racism or that something is racist. Believe them. This action is the simplest of all, and yet the one we probably trip over the most frequently. So finally, find your humanity. Allow the toxic niceness to slip away. Only then will we truly be in this fight. Namaste.